We begin with President Obama making some last-minute moves before the Trump administration takes over and ruffling a few feathers in the process. Welcome to Happening Now, everyone. I'm John Scott.
And I'm Melissa Francis, in for Jenna Lee today. The president establishing 2 new national monuments in the West, preserving more than 1.6 million acres of federal land in southeastern Utah and Nevada. This is despite the objections of residents and Republican lawmakers in those states. Native Americans applaud the designation, which prevents any future development on the land.
President-elect Trump has vowed to undo the president's environmental agenda, but whether he can reverse the designation of national monuments is unclear. Let's talk about it with Aaron Blake, a correspondent for the Washington Post. Why is it unclear, Aaron?
Well, basically, the president is using an authority that has existed for more than a century under the Antiquities Act of 1906. Ever since then, presidents have used this act to designate federal lands and waters for protected status. We haven't seen an example of a president trying to undo one of those designations. So we're really in uncharted territory if President-elect Trump does want to undo this specific designation. Now, we don't know specifically if this is one that he'll object to. Certainly many Republicans in Congress do. But this would seem to be one of the areas in which there could be a legal fight on their hands if they do decide to fight back.
And President-elect Trump maintains that the fact that he is moving into the White House is a direct repudiation of so much of what the Obama administration stands for, and yet the outgoing president seems to be going pedal to the metal to get some of these things done that he thinks are important. Witness the banning of drilling on the Atlantic shelf and in the Arctic, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's been a very active lame duck session for President Obama, not via legislation, of course, with Congress, but via his executive actions, which, of course, has been a long-standing objection that Republicans have had. You know, I think another thing in recent days along those lines has been Secretary Kerry's speech yesterday concerning the Israeli settlements in the West Bank. You know, this is something that President-elect Trump called out on Twitter, said that he opposed. Many Republicans think, I believe, think is an effort to hamstring the incoming administration when it comes to this particular issue. So, you know, there's been a lot of nice talk from the outgoing administration about, you know, a smooth transition and working with President-elect Trump. But they've certainly sought to get in a last few efforts and executive actions that they can take before President Obama's time is done.
What about precedent here? I mean, is this typical for the kind of thing that outgoing presidents do as their, you know, administrations are coming to a close?
You know, it's hard to say with any certainty. I think, you know, generally what they try to do in these lame duck sessions is try and get some more legislation passed before a new Congress takes over, maybe a different party takes over. That wasn't really on the table this time, given Republicans already had control of the Congress. You know, these are, kind of not tangential, but small parts of what the Obama administration has done writ large. If you look specifically at these monument designations, it's about 1.35 million acres. The Obama administration has already done this kind of thing for more than 550 million acres. So it's a relatively small portion of what they've done. At the same time, waiting until the end of the presidency, when, you know, the administration doesn't have to answer for this for a very long time, is certainly something that Republicans are going to cry foul about.
Back to the top and those 2 new national monuments that the president has created. You know, I'm from the West. There's a lot of federal land out there already, and it's always controversial when somebody in Washington takes a bunch of land in the West and says, okay, you cannot drill for oil or gas or do anything on these lands. And even the local populations there are very divided about the wisdom of the president's designation.
Yeah, I think this is really something that Easterners don't even understand. I don't think a lot of people outside of the West really understand just what a major issue this is in Utah, Nevada, you know, basically all west of the Mississippi River. You know, I think a good example of that is the standoff involving the Bundy family in recent years, a couple of standoffs These are very passionate issues. The West is a very independent region of the country. They don't love the idea that the federal government is necessarily taking over their land, which is what they view this as. The federal government views this as them essentially protecting these lands from oil drilling, other kinds of things, stepping forward to make sure that these areas are preserved. And so there's a very strong ideological split when it comes to these issues that sometimes spills over into some very heated standoffs like we've seen in recent years.
Yeah. There's also a plan that Donald Trump is floating to let veterans bypass the Veterans Administration and go to a private doctor if they need care. Seems like a great idea, but is it workable?
Yeah, in theory, I'm sure it's something that would meet with plenty of support, giving people more health care options. We don't know a whole lot about how this would be implemented, specifically what form it would take. I do think there will be some consternation about basically opening up the VA system, which has been kind of a closed system all these years, allowing veterans to use that system, giving them the option of using other physicians. What impact would that have on the VA system that's been set up? Certainly the VA system has had immense problems in recent years, and there is plenty of impetus in Washington for fixing those problems, I think.
We are an interesting time as these two, as one administration leaves and another one takes office. I know you'll be there to cover it in Washington. Aaron Blake, Washington Post. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Tributes pouring in as Hollywood reels from another tragic loss. Carrie Fisher's mother, Debbie Reynolds, died yesterday after suffering an apparent stroke while planning her daughter's funeral. Her son, Todd Reynolds, said the shock was just too much for his mother. Now stars and fans around the world are remembering Debbie Reynolds, whose career spanned more than 6 decades. Claudia Cowan is live in Los Angeles. Claudia, it is so sad.
And Hollywood is in shock, Melissa. You're right. It is so sad losing these mother-daughter icons just 2 days apart, a real 1-2 punch. Reynolds had struggled with health issues for some time, and her son, Todd Fisher, says that Carrie's death just devastated his mother. They were at his house in Beverly Hills discussing funeral plans when she fell ill, and she was rushed to the hospital and died within hours. We have pictures of the ambulance driving away, shot by TMZ. Todd Fisher says his mother talked about building some kind of monument for Carrie that would be big enough for her, too, eventually, but no one thought that they'd both go at the same time. Here you see that video shot by TMZ. While many fans were honoring Carrie Fisher at a lightsaber vigil near Disneyland, news broke that her mother had died, prompting a crowd of mourners to gather at Reynolds' Star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame.
She was just a great singer, a great dancer, and great actress, and contributed a whole lot to Hollywood. So she'll be well remembered by the fans.
No parent wants to outlive their children, and I've heard that her last words were, "I want to be with Carrie," and now she is.
Just like Carrie, when she made Star Wars, Reynolds found fame when she was just 19 and a relative unknown. She learned how to dance in just 3 months to co-star with Gene Kelly in Singin' in the Rain. She went on to become a Hollywood legend, but sadly never found success in marriage. Reynolds was divorced 3 times, most famously to Fisher's father, Eddie, who left her for her friend Elizabeth Taylor. Her relationship with her daughter Carrie was often strained, but they had reconciled in recent years. Friends and family now taking solace in the belief that mother and daughter are together again. Melissa.
Claudia, thank you for that report. John.
Fox Extreme Weather Alert now on a major winter storm bearing down on the Northeast. Millions of people getting ready for a blizzard ahead of the new year. Senior meteorologist Janice Dean live in the Fox Extreme Weather Center. Am I going to have to come over and shovel for you today, Janice?
Not yet, John Scott, but you never know what the future is going to bring as we get into the new year. I'm glad you offer. Current temperatures across the map, 43 in New York, so the storm is just about to get its act together. Too warm in New York, too warm along the coast to get any big snowfall totals, but interior sections of the Northeast and New England will certainly see big-time maritime snow. So there's our frontal system. Ahead of it, warmer than average temperatures, and actually we could see the potential for isolated severe storms, including maybe isolated tornadoes. We saw one earlier, a report of one in Georgia. So watching this system as it develops, comes off the coast and strengthens over the next 24 hours. We think this does have the potential to bring very gusty winds, maybe blizzard conditions to New England, and inches of snow. Taking a look at the forecast temperatures. So this is 4 p.m. Thursday, moving off Long Island. And again, the coastal areas of New England will get a rain event, but then we'll see the snow across interior sections, portions of upstate New York in towards New England. Also, the lake effect snow machine. So as we go overnight, this thing gets cranked up. We call this bombogenesis, where it drops in pressure 24 millibars in 24 hours, and it's going to crank up as it moves into the Maritimes in Canada. So winter weather advisories, winter storm warnings for New England here, where they could see upwards of maybe even 2 feet of snow as the storm really gets its act together, heading into Friday and through Saturday and Sunday. John Scott.
That's New Year's Eve, right?
Yes, exactly.
We are coming to the end of a new year. I think I've heard that.
Yes, we are. We are indeed. So what's going to happen to Eric Bolling and Kimberly Guilfoyle's hair when they are outside? This is very important information here. Fox News alert. Mostly cloudy skies. Don't think we're going to see any showers in the forecast. Temperature around 38, 39 degrees, and that's not bad, Melissa and John Scott. The warmest New Year's Eve we've ever had in New York City, 58. The coldest was 1. The wind chill, minus 21 back in 97. So they got nothing to complain about. And most of the country will be quiet with seasonal temperatures. So no big storms on the horizon and no big cold outbreaks. So that's the good news. I'm happy to deliver that to you today.
I've just been learning from Melissa that it's important, to keep one's hair looking good.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes,
I'm worried about Eric's hair, personally. It's Eric's hair that's my focus. But yeah.
God bless the hair and makeup people here. They are magicians.
That is the truth.
Except for John. John doesn't need any help at all.
No.
Happy
Let's
New Year,
move on.
my
We'll say
friends.
goodbye.
Let's move on.
Janistine, thank you much.
Relations between Washington and Israel taking a big hit, with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle reacting to a new war of words between the Obama administration and Israel's prime minister. Plus, a U.S. military helicopter crashes. Now investigators are trying to determine what caused the deadly accident.
My wife screamed, and we heard a loud pop.
Turned around and looked, and the helicopter parts were going everywhere, and we saw it just going straight down.
The U.S. Army is now investigating the deadly crash of an Apache helicopter in Texas. That chopper ended up in Galveston Bay, killing the 2 soldiers on board. Witnesses report hearing a loud pop, and when they looked up, they saw pieces of the aircraft falling off as it plummeted into the bay. The Army says the chopper was on a routine training flight. No word yet on the cause of that crash.
Right now, new fallout from an escalating battle between the U.S. and our key ally in the Mideast after Secretary of State Kerry slammed Israel and the Netanyahu government. In a speech you heard right here on Happening Now yesterday, Kerry pushed for a 2-state solution and defended the U.S. decision to abstain from a Security Council resolution condemning Israeli settlements. Prime Minister Netanyahu firing right back, saying Israel doesn't need a lecture on peace from foreign leaders. Joining us now is Mark Dubowitz. He is Executive Director for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It seems like the Obama administration has sort of a checklist of things they're doing on the way out the door, and this was one of them. Really sort of, it felt like lighting fire to this situation. A lot of people viewed it that way. Do you think the goal of this is, some have speculated the tense relationship between President Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu, even leaving sort of a mess for Donald Trump? Or is it about his sincere approach to the Middle East and the idea, sort of that the West has become too much of a focus?
Well, I think John Kerry and Barack Obama do sincerely believe that they're right in pushing Israel in this direction. I think, unfortunately, their view is not shared by most Americans who understand that Israel is a loyal ally of the United States under attack by radical Islamists and anti-American Arab rejectionists, and that Israel is fighting the same enemies we're fighting, and that this last-minute stab in the back is not something that's going to help give Israelis the confidence to take the steps for peace that everybody believes will one day be necessary.
If the goal was, to find peace, it seems like a lot of what was achieved by this speech, though, was antagonizing Benjamin Netanyahu and sending him sort of further into the arms of Donald Trump, who comes in next, who immediately tweeted about it, and they have this relationship. In a way, it seems like it may backfire on what the administration's intention was. Your thoughts on that?
I think it's absolutely going to backfire. I mean, I think what Donald Trump understands, what Barack Obama doesn't understand, is that the only way that you're going to get the Israelis to once again give up land, because every time they give up land, that land gets filled by the most radical Islamist forces with thousands of missiles aimed at their cities. The only way they're going to take another risk and give up land for peace is if they believe the United States has their back. And Barack Obama has not had Israel's back for 8 years. In fact, he's done everything possible to undermine not just the Israeli prime minister, but the Israeli state and the Israeli people. I think Donald Trump understands that. And if there is no daylight between the United States and Israel, Israel's leaders may be more prepared to take these enormous risks for peace that everybody is demanding.
You know, one of the assertions that was made yesterday by Secretary Kerry was this idea that in a one-state solution, that Israel can't be both a Jewish state and a democracy. Do you accept that?
Look, I think everybody believes that there needs to be a two-state solution. I think that the United States should not be supporting the creation of a second state that will be a terrorist state, that will be a corrupt state, that will be anti-American, and that will further add to the enormous instability and crisis in the Middle East. And so you can be a strong believer in a two-state solution, but you've got to be a strong believer in a state that is liberal and that is democratic and that is transparent and that it treats its own people right and treats its neighbors right. And I think that that is the overwhelming consensus in the United States, both Democrats and Republicans. And you saw the reaction from leaders in Congress on both sides of the aisle who reject the Barack Obama, John Kerry vision of what it takes to get peace.
As both sides have sort of made their case in the past 24 hours, some people have started to wonder maybe the two-state solution isn't the best solution, given the reasons on both sides for why it's not working so far. What do you think about that? Do you believe a two-state solution is the best solution?
Look, I do think a two-state solution is the best solution. I think it's a plausible solution, but not now, not until the Palestinians end their incitement, end their terrorism, end firing missiles into Israeli cities, end the knifing and car attacks. I mean, they cannot get a state on the basis of terrorism and the murder of other people's children. I mean, I just think that's not something the United States should support and can support. I think that if the Palestinians finally, after decades and decades of rejecting Israeli peace offers, finally come to the table and negotiate bilaterally an agreement with the Israelis that gives Israel security, then the Palestinians can get an independent state, but not until then.
Mark Dubowitz, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Well, the Santa Claus rally is stalling a bit as the Dow struggles to reach that 20,000 milestone, but how important, really, is one number? And will your 401k keep growing by leaps and bounds in the new year, or will it not? We'll take a look. Plus, a woman taking SoulCycle to court after just one class, claiming a too tough instructor gave her permanent injuries. Our legal panel on whether she's got a case. Well, right now, the Dow Jones is still within striking distance of 20,000, but will we reach that milestone before 2017? Take a look. Ooh, not heading in the right direction right now. Down 7 points on this Thursday. Fox Business Network's Nicole Petalides live at the New York Stock Exchange. Nicole.
Well, John, it certainly can be done, right? All you need is maybe a good afternoon, and tomorrow have a good day on Wall Street to the tune of about 180 points altogether, and there we will be, right at Dow 20,000. We've gotten very close over the last couple of weeks, 13 points or so, but weren't able to cross through it. I will say that things are still feeling pretty good good. You have consumer confidence at 15-year highs. The jobless claims just came in, and they're still good enough. That being said, some traders are still having some high hopes for the Santa Claus rally. Now, take a look what the Santa Claus rally means. It's actually from the Stock Traders Almanac. The last 5 days of the year, the first 2 days of the new year, and historically, a 1.5% gain in stocks since 1950 for the S&P 500. So that means that we could have a good last few days and into the new year, and maybe that could boost us right to Dow 20,000. However, I will say that this was invented back in '72, but the Hirsch family made this jingle up, and you're not going to like it if you're hoping for high stocks. If Santa Claus should fail to call, meaning that we're not seeing it, we're down 0.5%. If Santa Claus should fail to call, and here's the jingle, bears may come to Broad and Wall. Now that means investors beware, and you certainly don't want that song. What's been leading our charge here for the last quarter since Trump was elected? You could see Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Boeing, and American Express have all been stellar performers. So maybe we just need a great headline from Donald Trump, one more good piece of economic news. Maybe it's the Trump-Ryan agenda when it finally gets to go through. While there is a cautionary tone on Wall Street, and a lot of the traders I just asked, they said no, but there's still some holding on, I can tell you that. And here's the hat. Now we just have to still hold on to the Dow almost 20,000 hat. Sorry.
You need a red and white Santa hat, is what you need.
That's the problem.
Anything for the Santa Claus rally, right? Come on, you got a few days.
There you go. Be watching for it, Nicole. Thanks. Nicole Petalides.
We've got an interesting new legal case this morning. A woman is suing SoulCycle after taking just one spin class, claiming her instructor was too hard on her and she landed in the hospital. Let's bring in our legal panel. Joining me now, Ebony Williams, who is an attorney and a Fox News contributor. We have Philip Holloway. He's a criminal defense attorney and a former police officer. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Ebony, I'll start with you. So this is Kayla Cashman. She said she went to SoulCycle for the very first time. She had never done it before. And the instructor knew it was her first time, but kept coming over and making the bicycle harder, cranking it harder, making it more strenuous, and caused this condition which causes your muscle tissue to break down. What do you think?
Well, Melissa, anyone who's ever gone to a SoulCycle class, that includes me. I was a bit of a freak for a second there, but I weaned myself off of it. You know, that's kind of the SoulCycle way, right? You know, it's this kind of intense motivation. That's a signature format and style. I'm sure Philip will agree. This is kind of a basic, you know, negligence claim, you know, and it all comes down to what duty did SoulCycle have to these patrons, and did they indeed breach that duty? And I think ultimately when you look at this from a legal component, I don't see a strong case, Melissa, because you know, it's really one of those things where reasonableness, the reasonableness of the expectation of this plaintiff here to have a, you know, instructor kind of guide you step by step through it in a way that most people figure out on their own. I think it's a bit of a high bar.
Philip, the condition she has, which I won't even try to pronounce, is a permanent condition that results in your muscle tissue breaking down. That can cause kidney failure, by the way, and I did some research on it. It's usually caused by being struck by lightning, bitten by a venomous snake. It can happen when your body is crushed, either through an auto accident or a building collapses on you. How is she going to prove that she got that serious of a condition from 45 minutes of cycling?
Well, good morning, Melissa. Good morning to Ebony. And as usual, it's very difficult for me to disagree with my friend Ebony. I think this lawsuit is going about as far as that stationary bike went, because there's issues such as a voluntary assumption of a known risk. I have read their online waiver of liability, and it says, look, this can cause catastrophic damage. So, and you have to sign basically saying that you understand that. And look, let's face it, at the end of the day, she could have simply stopped pedaling if she felt like things were getting out of control. There's also the issue of contributory negligence. Even if she can get past the bar and prove that somehow SoulCycle was negligent, there's the issue of whether or not the plaintiff also bears some degree of responsibility. So she has a lot to get past. But if she could, hypothetically, and I don't think she can, she has to prove damages, and that's where this serious medical condition comes in. And if she's injured as badly as is reported to be, the damages could be quite high, but I just don't see them getting there.
Ebony, you know, they always say, I always hear lawyers say, and I don't know if it's true, I'm not a lawyer, you can't sign away your rights, that they can't can't give you, sort of a release and you sign away, what is unreasonable. And also at the same time, I would say, trying to be on SoulCycle's side here a little bit, that they may want to just get rid of this because it's bad PR, and it's not the first time they've been sued. There was another woman who is suing because she said she broke her ankle on the bike, and she claims she tried to talk to one of the instructors, and the instructor said, "We don't do breaks." I mean, like, that's the whole thing, is they try and kind of pump you up to get through it. So it's not totally unprecedented. And they may just want to stop the PR. What do you think of my arguments? Terrible?
I think it's, no, not at all. You should sign up for your first year, Melissa.
Okay.
It's, no, look, you're exactly right. That was the LA case you're referencing, and that kind of settled, I think, for around $100,000. Not a high settlement there, but because of your point, ultimately, by the time you pay litigators to hash this thing out for months or years, it is easier to settle. But there was also a New York case, and that was dismissed outright on its merits. It's interesting, though, all of these cases against SoulCycle only erupted when SoulCycle was sold to Equinox, which is kind of what we call deep pockets, back in 2011. So I think, Phil and I kind of got to raise an eyebrow at that.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks to both of you. Love it. John.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Syria's 5-year civil war might soon come to an end, and Vladimir Putin is handing the Obama administration a parting insult by offering the next president a seat at the negotiating table. We'll get into that. Plus, you might have seen ads for it this holiday season, but Amazon's new Echo voice assistant is now in, well, a legal case because prosecutors want Amazon to hand over some recordings as evidence in a murder investigation. News alert now out of Syria, where a ceasefire is set to go into effect tonight under a deal hashed out by Russia and Turkey. And in a parting shot at President Obama, Russia has invited President-elect Trump to participate in upcoming peace talks once he takes office. Senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palkot joins us live from London. What do we know about this peace deal, Greg?
John, probably the most remarkable thing about this deal is it could be the first ceasefire in a nearly 6-year Syrian civil war that stands even the remotest chance of working. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced the deal. It calls for the Syrian government and opposition groups to lay down their weapons at midnight Syria time. That's 5 p.m. Eastern today. Syria has, in fact, announced a nationwide halt in fighting. That fighting has left hundreds of thousands dead and millions displaced in Syria and around the world. And so have moderate rebels. Excluded in the deal, however, is ISIS and the very active Syrian branch of al-Qaeda. That could be a complication. But a key element in this is that several principal supporters of both sides, and that includes President Erdogan's Turkey, which backs the rebels, have agreed not only to halt their activities, but to police their corners. That also includes, of course, Russia and Iran, which backs Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, John.
So you've got Russia and Iran and maybe Turkey involved. What role does the U.S. play?
Remarkable stuff, John. The Obama administration has been basically boxed out of this thing, while Washington has been backing the moderate rebels as well, who are part of this plan, and they have been involved in past UN-backed talks. Russia has managed to push U.S. out for the moment of the entire picture. As already noted, however, President Putin did say that once President-elect Trump gets into office, the U.S. would be allowed in. Trump has been supportive of Russia's role in Syria and also against Obama's backing of the rebels. While this is all intriguing, there are reports, too, of even more interesting stuff, an outline of a long-term settlement that would divide up to some degree Syria, according to the various power sources, and would mean that also President Bashar al-Assad would leave office when his term is over. But that's getting way ahead of us, John. There are many ways that this could all blow up, starting at midnight tonight, or 5 p.m. Eastern. Back to you.
Yeah, seems like a lot of negotiating yet to be done. Greg Palkot in London. Thanks, Greg.
Right now, police in Arkansas are facing off with Amazon over the Echo voice assistant recordings of a murder suspect. The Echo smart speaker listens for voice commands to do things around the house, like turn on the lights, so its microphone is always on. Police have used a subpoena for recordings from the home of James Bates, who is charged with the murder of a man found dead in his hot tub in November of 2015. Amazon so far has said no. Morgan Wright is a cybersecurity analyst and a senior fellow at the Center for Digital Government. I've got a lot of questions about this one because my in-laws have an Alexa at home, and we were playing with it over the holiday. One thing, Morgan, so you have to, it's sleeping, in theory, on your counter when you're not using it. So to wake it up, you have to say, Alexa, what time is it? Alexa, turn on the lights.
Right.
So if he didn't say Alexa, are we sure that there's actually recordings of the murder, unless the victim's name was Alexa, but that would be quite a coincidence.
Hey, you just probably set off 50,000 Alexa devices in people's homes right now. Alexa, burn down my house. No, don't do that. Yeah. But no, actually, this is very interesting. A couple years ago, I was on with Trace Gallagher talking about a patent Verizon filed, be able to, from the keywords, be able to serve up advertising. We're now to where 1984 and George Orwell is actually in our homes. These things do, Melissa, they are on, and what they do is they take a segment. It's like a 15-second, let's say, buffer. They're always listening for 15 seconds, and then if they hear that wake word, then they know, hey, it's time for me. You have to be able to be in a mode to listen to hear that word so you can wake up. So the question is, how much of that was recorded? Because it does send it back to Amazon, to the mothership, so it can process it and fulfill actions like call Uber.
Do we know if they're saving it?
Well, they say that's the big question. There are certain things that are saved, I believe, only for a limited amount of time. The real question, and this is going to get underneath the covers, is it really are they really doing what they say they're doing in their privacy policies? Are they only keeping it? And part of this, I think they're going to lose in an appeal. But the question for Amazon is, are they really only keeping what they say they're keeping, or will this be one of those things where we find out they're violating their own privacy policy and storing information much longer than they should?
So I don't like having these kind of spies in my home, and I'm always suspicious of the devices that are listening to you. But there are more and more things out there like this. For example, okay, it started with Easy Pass, the thing in your car that pays the toll when you go through, and then we saw in legal cases that people could prove they either were or were not somewhere based on the activity on their Easy Pass. That was early on. There was another case in Florida where somebody had a Fitbit on, and they claimed that they claimed that somebody had come in their house and attacked them, an intruder, and the police were able to use the Fitbit data to prove that the person was actually asleep at the time and had made up the whole story. So there's all kinds of devices around us. What does the law tell you? I mean, this is a brave new world with all these different devices.
It is, and it's fascinating. If you go back and look at the 1920s when some of the original laws were created just to be able to tap telephones, that was based on copper wires running. Ooh. Now we have voice over IP, we have Vonage, we have Skype, we have Ooma. We have things that the law never intended for us, or it could not contemplate at that time happening to us now. So the law has always been slow to catch up to technology. Cops are very creative. Look, when I was a detective, I filed one of the very first search warrants to get an IP address of an email from an internet service provider in a missing baby case. I mean, judges weren't even used to that. So this data, it's Fitbit, it's Nest, it's your home thermostat, it's your refrigerator, it's your water heater, which in this case, they looked at how much consumption of water was used, not only for this, but to make national security cases, drug cases. There's a variety of things. We have just scratched the surface on where we can go with this.
So one of the lessons I'm taking away is to unplug your Alexa before you murder someone. But there's also the idea, I mean, for Amazon, it cuts both ways because they don't want to help out because it's going to discourage people, in theory, from having these things in their kitchen, or maybe you look at it the other way, that it's sort of a safety measure. I mean, I, for example, like to pay with the Curb app when I get into a taxi because then there's a record of what taxi I'm in. So God forbid something happens to me. Well, it's convenient too. But you start thinking about these things, especially as a mom and maybe as a woman, as safety features that I think I'm probably not going to kill someone. I mean, you never know how frustrated you can get in situations. But more than likely, these types of things might help me, so it could be good for Amazon, it could be bad for Amazon. What do you think they do?
No, this cuts both ways. And Amazon, and this is this is Apple case all over again. I was at the RSA conference when Loretta Lynch came out and said one company does not get to determine the national security policy of the United States. Amazon does not get to determine what the courts and the law considers evidence in a case. So I think here's the real shock. People are going to realize these things are listening to you and following you. If you go back and take all of this data, we're going to be able to reconstruct people's lives from the time they go to sleep till the time they wake till where they go, what they eat. I mean, this is truly, it's very Orwellian. It's 1984. We just don't realize it yet.
It's Orwellian, and as I tell my kids, you're not going to get away with it, so just don't do it.
Mom knows.
There you go. Morgan, thank you very much.
You bet, Melissa.
All right, John.
Well, it's an eerie scene. Heavy fog sparking car accidents and canceled flights, and it could continue through New Year's Day. We'll tell you where. Plus, new developments in the investigation into a deadly Russian plane crash. What authorities are ruling out and why.
So it looks a lot more like Halloween, I think, than winter in Dubai. Dense fog covering the city every night for the past month. The fog grounded flights. It sparked accidents because drivers can't see anything. Dubai police say they responded to 119 crashes yesterday alone. That's serious. Forecasters say the fog will stick around through New Year's Day. Wow.
Some new information now on the Russian military plane that crashed Christmas morning, killing all 92 people on board, with investigators now ruling out an explosion, saying the flight recorders show no evidence of that. But they have not ruled out something being done mechanically to bring that plane down. Here to talk about it, Bruce Buck-Roger, president of Aero Consulting Experts and a commercial airline captain. The Russians were quick to say this was not terrorism. They don't like to be embarrassed by terrorism, but what do you think about the likely causes of this particular crash?
Well, it's early in the investigation to really say at this point. However, ruling out the fact that there was no explosion on the airplane, right now it would lean towards possible mechanical and a pilot error scenario.
The pilots were talking apparently about having problems with the flaps. Those are those things people might see kind of creeping down from the wings before takeoff and landing. They give you extra lift. If you're having a problem with the flaps, that could cause a plane like that to go down.
So this is an old airplane. Tupolev Tu-154 was built back in the 60s. It has a lot of mechanical things going on with its wings. It's a very swept back wing designed to go very fast. So on takeoff, they have these flaps. They have these leading edge devices that come out. And if, let's say on takeoff, you're heavyweight, one of the flaps don't retract and one stays out. So now you're going to have a rolling motion of the airplane. The pilots would put in ailerons to counteract that roll. So with the ailerons out and the flaps being down, this is possibly one scenario. A lot of drag would be on the airplane and the airplane would start descending.
And if you've got a full load of fuel on board and a full load of passengers, that could be obviously tragic.
Right, and it's a one scenario. I mean, they're also looking into fuel problems because the airplane did get fully fueled in where it was last landed, and then also we're also looking at possibly engine failures. So there's a lot that play out. So the flight data recorder that they have discovered and the cockpit voice recorder, both of those will show an accurate depiction and give us the narrative of the history of the airplane and what happened to bring the airplane down.
I want to take a quick look at another crash, an update on Egypt Air Flight 804, which went down in the Mediterranean back in May. Investigators had pointed to an onboard fire as the likely cause, but now government officials say they've found traces of explosives on some of the bodies recovered there. 66 people died in that crash. Does it look like a bomb is the likeliest scenario here?
So here we have the French authorities working with the Egyptian authorities trying to put together what actually happened on this airplane. And this was about 7 months ago that this accident took place. So they found TNT. Now, I'm not a forensic expert. However, I do know that an Airbus is built out of carbon fiber. It's also a fly-by-wire airplane. In other words, the pilot inputs are going through wires to the flight control, so there's a lot of cables there. When an airplane catches on fire, it's creating smoke and fumes. And out of those smoke and fumes, let's say out of the wire bundles, could come cyanide, could come some other chemicals. So this is something that needs to be further investigated, and they're doing their best. So they haven't quite ruled out a terrorist act yet, an explosion on board the airplane. They're looking into that, and it is possible that it is one of the scenarios that will play out. Nobody's claimed this accident as of yet, and it was 7 months ago. So they're still looking into it. They need to figure out, is it TNT? Is it some burn-off from carbon fiber or wires that they're finding? So, and they'll figure this out.
But security in that part of the world not quite up to the standards that we enjoy in the United States. Think about that every time you go through those annoying TSA lines.
Well, it's annoying but necessary.
Absolutely. Buck Roger, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Melissa.
They risk their lives every day, but more of our police officers are becoming victims in targeted attacks like the ambush in Dallas. Now a new report on police fatalities.
Let's find out what's ahead on Outnumbered at the top of the hour. Sandra and Kennedy, what's coming up?
Hello, John Scott. Well, U.S. relations with our key Mideast ally, Israel, at a new low. Even some Democrats criticizing Secretary of State Kerry's speech yesterday, and now calls for the U.S. to defund the UN. Should we?
Plus, President-elect Trump says President Obama is making the transition anything but smooth, then reverses himself only hours later. So is Mr. Obama making things more difficult?
All that plus our hashtag one lucky guy outnumbered. Top of the hour. I feel like we're sitting so far apart.
Here we go.
Oh, there you go. See you then.
See you soon.
Right now, a disturbing new report on police fatalities in 2016 with ambush-style killings like the one in Dallas, pushing shooting deaths of officers to the highest level in more than 4 decades. Caroline Shively is live in Washington with more on this. Caroline.
Melissa, 135 police officers have been killed this year, the most since 2011, driven by a spike in fatal shootings and specifically ambushes. 64 officers have been shot to death in 2016. That's a 56% jump over last year when 41 officers were fatally shot. That's according to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. 21 of those 64 shootings were ambush style, including 5 officers killed in Dallas in July, then 3 more in Baton Rouge just 10 days later. They are among 8 multiple shooting deaths that killed 20 officers this year, tied with 1971 for the highest since 1932. Here's a list of the deadliest states for officers in 2016. 17 officers killed in Texas, 10 in California, 9 in Louisiana, 8 in Georgia, and 6 in Michigan. 2 of the latest deaths were lifelong friends Jody Smith and Nicholas Smarr of the Americus, Georgia Police Department. Both were shot during a domestic violence call earlier this month. Even after being shot, Officer Smarr performed CPR on Smith until he lost consciousness. When backup officers arrived, they found Smarr slumped over Smith. He died that day. Smith the next. Smarr was supposed to serve as Smith's best man in his wedding in May. Both men were 25. On average, a fallen officer is 40 with 13 years of service and 2 children. Melissa, back to you.
Wow, what a shame. All right, Caroline, thanks for your time. John.
You bet.
New in our next hour of Happening Now, legal action in a high-profile unsolved murder. And it comes a little more than 20 years to the day after little JonBenet Ramsey was killed. Why the young beauty queen's brother is now suing a major TV network. Plus, the big advances in cancer treatments this year, what they are and how they could fuel even bigger medical breakthroughs in 2017. Kimberly's hair looks like.
Right. Well, I always talk about Eric's hair because I think Kimberly's hair has its own entourage, so we don't have to worry about that.
It's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun no matter how you slice it. Hopefully the weather will be good and it'll be great to watch. We will for sure. Well, we will see you. I'll see you back here in an hour. We'll see you back here in an hour.